Hey guys, this is Coach Lowe, and we're going to go over the WIK number 2, what I know, which is WIK, number 2. And so if you have your worksheet or if you have your notebook, let's go ahead and put some things in there. All right, so first of all, when we're talking about domain and range here, domain, remember, is how wide our graph gets. So this first one says I can specify the domain and the range of functions of various types and evaluate a function at a given point in its domain. So what type of function is this? So remember, this is a parabola or a quadratic because it's U-shaped. And so let's look at the domain. Domain means how wide this thing can get. So this can get wide forever. I can choose super large values for X and find a Y value, or I can choose super small and find a Y value, no restrictions in the domain. The range, however, has restrictions. It bottoms out right here at this point, but it does keep going to infinity at the top. So it just keeps getting higher, but this is where it bottoms out. So about negative 6.25, maybe 6 1/4, 6.2. It's not quite a half, so I'll put a point there if I want you to be super picky. We'll estimate right now, so we'll put 6.25 to infinity. All right, find f of 1 means when x is 1, notice the 1 is in the x slot. So when x is 1, what's y? That's the question that it's asking. So when x is 1, I'm going to put a dot on the graph and let's name it 1, negative 4. So when x is 1, y is negative 4. All right, hope that makes sense on that one. These solutions actually are posted in Google Classroom. So try out g of x and check on Google Classroom and see if you're correct. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, so as we look at this next part, let me get all this stuff out of here. All right, so on this next part, I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide functions using function notation and recognize the domain restrictions. All right, so let's look at the first one. We are subtracting. So usually when we've talked about subtraction, actually not usually, every time, I put these guys in parentheses because I like to change addition, or I like to change the subtraction problems to addition problems. So in elementary, you heard change the signs and add. Well, what that means is I'm going to distribute this negative through to all these guys in here. So this becomes an addition sign, and then I change the sign of everything in here. So as I distribute this negative through, as I push it through, meaning it's plus a negative of everything that's in this parenthesis, then I can just move to addition now. So notice everything in here changed. So I'm doing the opposite of everything in here, and I'm going to add. So now you're looking for like terms. So I look for my highest power of x. I don't have anything to go with it, so I write it down. If I did, though, I would add or subtract the numbers that are in front of x cubed. Now I have an x squared, and it's the only one. And then I have 3x, and it's the only x term. But then I have numbers. So I have a negative 5 and a negative 6, and that would be a negative 11. All right, on the next one, we're looking at distributive property here. So make sure on this that you're adding your exponents when you multiply variables together. But the 2x squared is going to get multiplied to both things in here. And then we're also going to take the positive 3x and multiply it to both things over here. And then lastly, we're going to take the negative 5 and multiply it by everything that's in here. And then combine like terms. So you can look again on Google Classroom and check out the solutions to that. All right, on part C, we worked this one in class. I am looking for you to be able to write this as a fraction, and then I'm also looking for you to be able to state the domain restrictions because we cannot have a 0 in the denominator. In other words, this expression cannot be 0. I cannot have a number over 0. That is undefined. This fraction is undefined. if I have 0 in the denominator. The fraction will be undefined. So I want to keep from getting a 0 in the denominator, which means I want to target the number that makes this expression 0. So I solve this equation, and I divide by 2. And so I see that x cannot be 5/2 or 2.5. If I plug in, so if I graph this guy right here, if I look at 2.5 on the graph, there will be no y value. There will be a hole there. All right, so this is the answer for the first part. Find h of x over r of x. And then this is the answer for the domain restrictions. X cannot be 5/2. All right, so on D and E, you're using these functions and plugging in 2 where there's an x, and then plugging in -3 in the G function where there's an x, and you're finding the value of the function. So like on D, it would look like 2 times 2 squared plus 3 times 2 minus 5. And then you go through order of operations. Square the 2, multiply by 2, multiply these two guys together, and then you're adding or subtracting to get the result. G of -3, we're going to plug in -3 where there's an x, and then work that bad boy out. All right? So hope that makes sense. That's numbers 1 and 2 on WIK number 2. This is Coach Lowe, and I'm out.